everyone has their secrets. Some are minor, like sneaking an extra piece of cake, pretending to be sick so you don't have to go to school, or acting like you understood what your friend said when they made an obscure reference.
I understood that reference.
Did you really? No.
And others are a bit more major, like cheating on your significant other, stealing something valuable, or God forbid, falsifying your tax returns.
I'm crazy enough to take on Batman, but the IRS? No, thank you.
And somewhere there in the middle is being a superhero, especially for those with a secret identity. That's right, in the previous discussion, I talked at length about the importance I place in the superhero's secret identity, and why I think it's a fixture of the genre and character archetype itself. And this mostly comes down to how it creates the contrast between the mundane world and the superheroic one, allowing for these larger-in-life figures to stand out, while also contrasting them with the world that they're inhabiting. And the secret identity allows them to effortlessly switch between those two worlds, so that both can be better fleshed out, as well as helping give our hero a bit more relatable issues, things we can understand like deadlines, 9-to-5 jobs, and personal obligations. All those things they don't tell you to look forward to when you're growing up. And while you might worry that this would result in an unbalanced story structure, with people counting down the minutes until these boring human scenes are done so we can get back to the high-flying heroics, but in the right hands, a good writer can make those simple human interactions far more endearing than the biggest spectacle money can buy. But lately, with a lot of modern superhero stories, I've noticed them severely lacking in this department, with most writers being solely interested in the superhero and less about the guy underneath the mask. So I want to look into why this might be. How come it seems like most writers are doing away with the secret identity altogether? When did this trend start? And is it always necessary for a superhero to have a secret identity? Or are there some instances where they're better off without it? So, let's discuss. Now, if you're all familiar with the superhero genre, then you'll know that a lot of protagonists that we follow within this story structure will partition their lives into two halves, one dedicated to the ordinary and the other to the extraordinary. And the secret identity is the wall that separates the two. There'll be many explanations given as to why they need to maintain this divide and keep it all a secret, usually boiling down to things like, if my enemies found out who I was, they'd hurt the people I love, or the stress of being a hero is something you can't endure full time, or maybe just to avoid the repercussions of all the illegal dealings they're engaging in. Sure, they're technically stopping crimes, but they're not really going about doing so by any legal procedures. Often the explanation for this is because the legal system failed them, and we're getting off topic here. The point is a lot of superheroes tend to take on this burden, but they don't want to always bring it home with them. It's for this reason why many incorporate the mask directly into their costume design. Characters like Spider-Man, The Flash, Green Lantern, well, at least half of them, Batman, Daredevil, hell, even Superman, though his mask is actually a part of his civilian disguise and not his superhero one. Bit of a clever twist there. But while there are a lot that follow this rigid guideline, plenty have come in to buck this trend and show that it's not the only way to get things done. A couple of early examples of heroes that didn't have a secret identity included Doc Savage, Buck Rogers, Mandrake the Magician, and someone you might have heard of, Namor the Submariner. Though these were all in the formative days of the comic book superhero, when they were still figuring things out. But by the time of the 40s and 50s, and definitely by the 1960s, a specific template for their superhero would be accepted amongst the array of comic book publications. This was obviously as a result of the popularity of Superman, resulting in a lot of characters sharing quite a degree of similarities with the Man of Steel himself. But there would be a group of characters that would come in to challenge this template in 1961, with the publication of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's Fantastic Four, Marvel's first celebrity superhero team. That's right, the Fantastic Four would violate a lot of the common superhero tropes around this time, and one of those key distinctions was not having a secret identity. And the team would see a great deal of success, being warmly welcomed by the comic book community, and beloved still to this day. However, despite them being a household name both within their own world and within ours, the concept of turning all of its heroes into public figures with famous personas did not catch on with the rest of the superhero community. Plenty of other teams would maintain their secret identity, like the X-Men, the majority of the Justice League, and the same deal with the Avengers. Along with, the other smaller teams, like the Teen Titans, the Doom Patrol, and so many more. Yet despite now having an existing template to work off of, a lot of superheroes would still maintain their anonymity for many years to come. Characters like Wonder Woman, Thor, Ant-Man and the Wasp, and hell, even Iron Man, kept their real names close to the chest. But, plenty of characters didn't feel the same way, and so you had others running around like Jon Stewart Green Lantern, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, Booster Gold, and Captain America, who never shied away from the spotlight.
Are you okay? Yeah. Hold it.
And as we went over in the previous discussion, this staple of the superhero genre would carry over into many of their big screen adaptations. Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, Daredevil, Catwoman, all of them would go to great lengths to hide from the world who they really were, as well as maintain the classic balancing act of their personal life and superhero one coming into conflict with one another. But now we get into the turning point, because despite the majority of superhero stories either adopting this framework or leaving it ambiguous as to how much the public actually knows about them, at some point or another, this plot point was all but dropped from most superhero stories in favor of just blending these two worlds together or making their personal life all but irrelevant. But when did the decline of this particular element in storytelling first start to take hold? Well, that's an easy question to answer, because you'll have to look no further than one of the most famous lines in all of film history.
I don't want to see this on your MySpace page.
No, the other one.
That lovely lady you woke up with, what was his name?
No, not that one either. Leave the homophobia in 2008.
I am Iron Man.
Was that so hard?
Yeah.
Good lord. So yeah, this movie ends with Tony proudly proclaiming that he is Iron Man. And this was truly a momentous moment in the ever-growing list of superhero narratives, because up to this point, nearly every single one of these stories had followed that framework I'd mentioned earlier, the only exceptions being characters that never had a secret identity, like Blade, Punisher, and the Fantastic Four. But every other character hiding their face would continue to do so in their live-action interpretation. That is, until this little film in 2008. Yeah, believe it or not, in the comics, for the longest time, the public was not aware that Tony Stark and Iron Man were one and the same person. The film gives a little wink and nod to this element by saying that the cover story they're going to use is that Iron Man is some kind of a bodyguard. And though they laugh it off in the moment, for a good portion of this character's history, that was the story they ran with. And it wasn't until the seminal event Civil War that Stark revealed to the whole world who he was. So while this big coming out was based somewhat in the comics, the timetable was heavily accelerated. And personally, I completely agree with the idea that the filmmakers had. Iron Man foregoing his secret identity is in line with the character that we've seen thus far, and I'll always champion trying something new if you truly believe that it will result in the best story being told. Also, since Iron Man up to this point wasn't exactly the most prominent Marvel character, I mean, don't get me wrong, in the Marvel universe he was a well-known industrial philanthropist, but people in our world, they just didn't have as much of a tie to him. Me excluded, because I first found out about this character through the Spider-Man animated series and his own cartoon outing with that killer metal intro. No, not that one. Yeah, the second one, the mullet. There we go. Pretty much every outing for the character up until 2008 had kept his secret identity close to the chest. Aside from the handful of people that you'd expect to know, it was not public knowledge that these two guys were one and the same. But following this character's big screen outing and his earth-shattering ending, every follow-up depiction of the character would forego this secret identity in favor of going with the new status quo that the movie had set. But the films didn't just stop there. Nearly every character that Marvel had at its disposal at the time also lent themselves to foregoing this aspect of the superhero narrative. Black Widow and Hawkeye aside, since both of them aren't really so much public figures as they are spies, Captain America, Thor, and the Hulk would also not really have anything going on at home outside of their capes and tights. Which for the most part is in keeping with their story, though Thor at the time did have an alternate personality where he was this nerdy doctor named Donald Blake who walked with a cane, which when he slammed on the ground would turn into Thor. But by the time the movie had come out, they had all but dropped this storyline and pretty much just established that that was all just a big test from Odin, because of course it was. Other characters include Captain Marvel, who had a whole history of being Ms. Marvel that they completely erased, so yeah, the secret identity was probably going to go as well. You'd have Black Panther, who really never had a secret identity in the comics. I mean, he's the king of Wakanda. What use would it be if he also worked at like a Baskin Robbins? Doctor Strange turned his back on the world of medicine in favor of living with a creepy cult in the mountains. In the Guardians of the Galaxy, particularly Peter Quill, no one can even remember who these guys are, so it's not like their alter ego will be famous anyways.
There's another name you might know me by.
Star-Lord. Who?
I will say it is a little bit depressing that Ant-Man never stuck to this trend.
Hi, I'm Scott.
It's kind of interesting having him be a thief by night, but also having him try to hold down a legit job by day. But yeah, most of the characters we'd be following were pretty much exclusively superheroes. And of course that does lead to a problem I mentioned in the previous discussion, which is the disconnect from the rest of the world. Since everyone in their social circle is another superhero, it can become easy to lose track of what a regular guy in this larger-than-life reality experiences on a day-to-day. The first two Avengers films would try to give us a little bit of a grounded perspective by having characters like Coulson, Dr. Helen Cho, and a handful of others like the Barton family to help remind us that the high-flying antics are only one aspect of these people's lives. But as the movies went on, the stakes went higher and got deeper into the lore, we really kind of forgot about the people on the ground. A hopeful remedy to this was supposed to be the introduction of the character of Spider-Man, but unfortunately Marvel really did not have much of an interest in pursuing the character's dual identity at all. I could talk about a number of different shortcomings in regards to how I feel Marvel handled the character of Spider-Man, but his secret identity has got to be one of the worst. With very little regard to how it was revealed to the people in his lives, and treating it for the most part as an annoying hurdle, rather than the life-splitting wedge it's often portrayed as. And there's not much of a consequence when people find out who's under the mask. His relationship with Aunt May, Ned, and MJ never once takes a hit as a result of the lies he's been telling, even though in all three of these cases, they found out on accident, rather than Peter coming clean and being honest with them. You could argue that last point a bit with MJ, but she's the one who confronted him on that bridge.
That's what you were gonna say, that you're Spider-Man.
No.
I mean, it really is a big secret. I feel like the people closest to him should treat this more than just clearing up some confusion as to where he goes during the day. They just don't take advantage of any of the drama of this situation. And by the time Peter's identity is outed to the rest of the world in the third film, I'll be honest, I didn't notice much really change in how his day-to-day operations went. Outside of people just accosting a bit more in the hallway, it pretty much plays almost no factor after the first 20 minutes. In fact, the only reason that Peter goes to Doctor Strange to help him put the genie back in the bottle isn't because he can't handle the pressure of everyone knowing who he truly is, but because after him and his friends received the rejection letter from the college of their dream, he didn't realize that you also could file an appeal at the admission board for MIT, which to be honest at the time I also didn't think was a possibility either, but let's just say both Peter and I aren't exactly playing with a full deck here. And you know, part of me understands why Marvel chooses to go down this route. If you look back on their films, especially their more recent outings, they've been kinda trying to sand down the edges that these characters might have. The stories they tell aren't exactly hard-hitting. It's why a lot of these things can feel surface level. And unfortunately, the secret identity doesn't lend itself to this style of storytelling. It creates what they might see as unnecessary obstacles, getting in the way of the fun moments that they want to put on screen. But I've said it before, I think this is kind of a shallow approach. I really do wish that they would lean more into those hard-hitting moments that these stories lend themselves to, rather than just rushing past them so we can get to the next big set piece. There's also the financial motivation of it all, and the fact that these actors' likenesses, it ain't cheap. And if they're really putting all this money into getting someone like Tom Holland or Robert Downey Jr. into the role, then you can bet your ass that they're gonna try to make as much out of that investment as possible. So hiding their beautiful mugs behind some goofy looking mask? Well, good luck explaining that to your investors. At first it was common to just have their mask be destroyed at the end of the final battle, you know, so the actors can perform without something obstructing their face, and the producers can show off the actor. But wouldn't it just be easier if they always had these things off, and who cares why? Let those nerds writing these things figure that part out? Well, that seems to make a lot of sense to me. But all in all, the MCU is just not all that interested in the secret identities of its cast. The only exception to this is Daredevil, but that's kind of a different creative team altogether. And since the MCU was, and still kinda is, the leading superhero franchise, it pretty much rewrote the standard for how these things were told. Now superhero stories are pretty much just action-adventure films, where the dual identity is at best non-existent and at worst an afterthought. Since DC just pretty much tries to do whatever Marvel did with a 5-year delay, they too would just focus on the super aspect of their characters and not so much into their day-to-day lives. So Aquaman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, all their stories would pretty much just be the one adventure with very few B or C plots included. Aquaman's whole story saw him try to reclaim the throne of Atlantis twice, and the first Wonder Woman movie was a wartime period piece where everybody's lives were upended. As for a sequel, I really couldn't tell you what happened to that thing if my life depended on it, but I'm pretty sure secret identity wasn't a big factor. And The Flash was, well, to be kind to that film, which I'm not usually, it was dealing with time travel and all sorts of Speed Force related shenanigans. So following Man of Steel, the only characters that headlined a movie that also had a secret identity were Shazam and Blue Beetle, though both these characters would reveal their identity to their entire family, which severely reduced the interpersonal drama as a result of the toll that such a secret would have. And that's pretty much all there is to say about secret identities in the DCEU, considering the fact that Batman himself never got a solo film. But now that I mentioned the Caped Crusader, we might be able to end this discussion on a high note. Because yes, Batman's tenure in the DC was pretty much exclusively Ben Affleck growling in a mask or growling in a cave or just growling at a screen. Robert Pattinson's portrayal got to have a little bit more meat on its bones. In 2022's The Batman, directed by Matt Reeves, we get to view the Dark Knight in a bit of a different light. Up to this point, most film incarnations of the character primarily follow Bruce Wayne and view Batman more as a tool he uses to enact justice. This film changed that by almost having it entirely be based around Batman himself and foregoing Bruce Wayne altogether. But where in other instances I would roll my eyes and view this as just another example of filmmakers being less interested in the more mundane moments in these characters' lives, The Batman actually makes a point of this, showing that Bruce Wayne's obsession has resulted in his public persona, if you'll pardon the pun, waning. And the story itself is about how Batman alone is not enough to get the job done of saving Gotham. And if Bruce is truly dedicated to this mission, then he needs to use every resource at his disposal. Not just his fists, but also his name, and more importantly, the influence that carries. So yeah, while he's in the suit pretty much 90% of the film, the fact that the movie makes a point of this justifies the character's identities being so one-sided, and hopefully sets up future films to better explore how he balances the two personas. And I can give these compliments to the Superman movie that came out this year as well, considering the fact that, once again for the most part, we're really just following the Man of Steel, but his secret identity is still kept intact, leaving the door open for future storytellers, or hell, James Gunn himself, to take advantage of this element of the character.
So you know about the hypnoclasses.
But that's pretty much what I have to say on the idea of a secret identity. All in all, I think it's one of the most endearing aspects of the superhero, and one I want us to utilize more in as many creative ways as possible. We've already seen it creating a burden on the protagonist's life by having them not being able to reveal why they can't be 100% honest with the people around them. And while that story is ripe for conflict and drama, there's plenty more you can do with it. Like pinning the two sides at odds with each other, having them both trying to solve the same problem but from different ends. Or maybe explore how tantalizing it is to be a full-time superhero, followed by the unexpected cost that such a sacrifice would have. You know, justify why it is imperative that some of these characters keep their work life and home life separate. The Spider-Man 2 video game did a great job with this with Black Cat, so hopefully if we ever introduce that character, this might be something we can explore in live action. You know, so long as they don't just dox Peter in his next outing. But in conclusion, I love the opportunities for storytelling offered by The Secret Identity, and I look forward to more stories diving into why so many choose to live half their life under a mask. That is, when they're not just using nanotech to pull it back during those money shots.
No one seems to grasp the concept of the mask.